This was about 4 years ago at one of those mid-sized regional parks. The kind that's too big to feel local, but not quite big enough to have real security presence everywhere you go. I'd gone alone, which I know sounds like the setup to every horror story ever told. But I did that kind of thing pretty regularly back then. I liked being able to move at my own pace, ride what I wanted, eat when I felt like it without negotiating with anyone. It was a Tuesday in late July, hot enough that the lines were shorter than a weekend would have been. I was in a decent mood, pulling into the lot. I noticed him near the entrance gates, and I want to be clear that at that point, noticing him meant almost nothing to me. He was standing off to the side while I was waiting to get my ticket scanned, a guy, maybe late 40s. Medium build, baseball cap, just kind of standing there not really moving toward anything. I glanced at him the way you glance at anyone when you're waiting in a slow line and looking for something to land your eyes on. He was looking back. I looked away. That was the whole interaction. Red flags everywhere, I know, but in the moment it registered as absolutely nothing. I spent the first hour or so on the bigger coasters on the far east side of the park. I was in line for the second one, maybe 45 minutes in, when I saw him again. He was about 8 or 9 people back in the same queue. I remember thinking that it was probably just one of those coincidences that happens at parks, because there are only so many rides and only so many paths between them. People end up overlapping. I genuinely believed that. I rode the coaster, thought nothing further of it. Went to find something to eat because I hadn't had breakfast and the heat was starting to work on me. There's a little food area near the center of the park. Kind of a cluster of stands with some outdoor seating, nothing special. But they had decent loaded fries and I found a table under a canopy and sat down. I was maybe halfway through eating when I looked up and he was at a stand about 30 feet away, ordering something, facing my direction. I want to say he wasn't looking at me specifically, but I can't say that honestly. I remember thinking, okay, that's 3 times, and then immediately talking myself back down. Big park, busy day, same traffic patterns. I finished eating. The direct contact happened about 2 hours later. I was waiting near a smaller ride, one of those spinning flat rides they put in the transition zone between the family section and the bigger stuff. I wasn't even going to ride it. I was just standing nearby, checking my phone when he walked up next to me and said, pretty casually, that I'd been covering a lot of ground. That was it. Just that, I'd been covering a lot of ground. I gave him a short non-answer, something like, yeah, it's a good day for it. Put some distance between us. But the comment stayed with me because it implied he'd been watching me move through the park. Not just ending up in the same places. Watching. I made a deliberate choice after that to shift to the complete opposite side of the park. I crossed all the way to the west end. That had a water feature section I hadn't planned to visit. I figured if our paths had been overlapping by chance, that would fix it. I'd be somewhere entirely different, and I wouldn't see him again, and I could finish the afternoon and feel silly about the whole thing on the drive home. That would have been fine with me. Feeling silly would have been the ideal outcome. He was at the west end. I saw him sitting on a bench near the entrance to the water section. This time, he saw me see him and he didn't look away. I kept walking. My chest was doing something uncomfortable and I was moving faster than I had been all day, and I was trying to decide whether I was overreacting or whether 4 separate sightings plus an unsolicited comment about my movements was actually something worth acting on. I decided it was worth saying something to someone. I found a park employee near a ride exit, a young woman, probably 19 or 20, one of the seasonal staff running the exit lane. I told her there was a man who'd been following me around the park for most of the day and had made a comment that made me uncomfortable. I described him. She looked at me with that particular expression that means she wasn't sure what I wanted her to do about it. She said she could radio someone if I wanted, but that it sounded like it might just be coincidence. She wasn't dismissive in a rude way. She just clearly had no protocol for what I was describing and no immediate path to someone who did. I said okay and walked away, which I regret. But I didn't know what else to do in the moment, and part of me still wanted to believe she was right. I left about an hour earlier than I'd planned to. I didn't see him again inside the park after that, and I told myself maybe it really had been coincidence. Maybe the comment had been a weird attempt at small talk from a lonely guy who wasn't good at reading people. I was trying to land on something that made the whole thing manageable as I walked out to the parking lot. It was a big lot, the kind sectioned off with letters and numbers on signs. I was parked somewhere in the middle of Section D. I got to my car, threw my bag in, started the engine. I did a shoulder check before backing out, the way you do. In the row adjacent to mine, and maybe 4 or 5 spaces down, there was a sedan with a man sitting in the driver's seat. Not pulling out, not on his phone, just sitting there facing forward. I could see in my rear view that his eyes were on my car. I could not tell you with complete certainty that it was him. The hat looked the same. The build looked the same. But I was looking in a mirror from distance, and I was already scared, and I know that scared people see what they're afraid of seeing. What I can tell you is that I pulled out faster than I normally would, and I did not look back once I hit the exit road. I drove about 8 miles before I stopped shaking. I've thought about it a lot since then. That particular combination of individually explainable moments that add up to something that doesn't have an explanation. The entrance, the ride queue, the food stand, the comment, the West End, the parking lot. Each one, isolated, means nothing. Together, I don't know what to do with them. I told a friend about it that night and they said it sounded creepy but probably harmless. I've more or less agreed with that in the years since because agreeing with it is easier than the alternative. I don't know if he followed me there. I don't know how long he'd been watching before I noticed. Honestly, not knowing is the part that still gets to me. I was 19 that summer and needed money, so I took a seasonal position at a park about 40 minutes from where I lived, operating one of the smaller spinning rides near the back of the family section. It wasn't glamorous work. You stand at a podium, you check height requirements, you push a button, you watch the same ride cycle for 8 hours. The pay was fine for a 19-year-old, and most of the staff were around my age, college kids burning through a summer. That was pretty much the vibe across the whole seasonal crew. Young, underpaid, mostly indifferent. Which is why the guy I'm going to call Dennis stood out pretty much from day one. Dennis was older, not ancient, maybe mid-30s, but visibly out of place among a staff where the average age was probably 21. He was quiet in that particular way where you notice the quiet, you know what I mean? Not shy quiet, just present in a way that didn't draw attention to itself, but was somehow always there. He operated one of the kiddie coasters maybe 2 attractions over from mine, and in the first couple weeks I honestly didn't think much about him. Socially awkward older guy taking a seasonal job. I figured there were 100 mundane reasons for that. Maybe he'd had a gap in employment. Maybe he was between things and needed the structure. Maybe he just liked the park. People work seasonal jobs for all kinds of reasons, and most of them are perfectly ordinary. At 19, I wasn't particularly inclined to read anything sinister into an older guy working temporary work in summer. It seemed like the kind of thing that happened. The first thing that felt slightly off was the break room situation. Our breaks were staggered by section, so in theory the same 3 or 4 people cycled through the back break room during any given window. Dennis wasn't in my cycle, but he started showing up. Not every day at first, just enough that I noticed and thought it was probably a schedule thing, probably nothing. He'd sit across the room, eat his food, occasionally say something generic about the park or the heat. Red flags everywhere, I know. But in the moment you talk yourself out of it because the alternative explanation feels dramatic. You rationalize it. You tell yourself that noticing something uncomfortable doesn't make you right to be uncomfortable. You're 19, and you don't want to be the person who makes things weird by accusing someone of making things weird. Then he started finding reasons to come by my station. He'd say he was on his way to grab something from the supply shed, or he'd claim one of his ride components had been flagged and he was waiting on maintenance. Plausible every single time. That's the thing I keep coming back to. None of it was impossible to explain away. He'd hang around for 10 or 15 minutes, make small talk, then leave. I started dreading those visits without fully being able to articulate why. There was never a moment I could point to and say, that was the problem. It was the accumulation, the pattern that only made sense when you stepped back and looked at it all at once. In the moment, each visit was just a coworker killing time between attractions. Separately, they meant nothing. Together, they meant something else entirely. He volunteered for the same shift rotation I was on. I found that out when the schedule went up for the 3rd week and his name was right there next to mine on the same opening block, same closing block. I told myself it was a coincidence. We had maybe 30 people in our section. Schedules overlapped. It happens. About a month in, he mentioned what time I clocked out. Specifically, not approximately, he said the exact time I was scheduled to finish my shift that day, casually, like it was just information that existed. I remember I kind of laughed it off and said something like, "Yeah, can't wait." But I thought about it after. I hadn't told him my schedule. It wasn't posted anywhere he would have had access to that I knew of. I talked myself into believing he'd just overheard someone mention it. Then he referenced a conversation I genuinely have no memory of having with him. It was something about a restaurant near where I lived. He said something like, "You mentioned you like that place on Brenner, right?" I didn't correct him in the moment because I wasn't sure enough. But I drove home that night running through every interaction we'd had, and I could not find the conversation he was describing. I'd never told him where I lived. I'd never told him the name of a restaurant anywhere near my house. I started changing my routes through the park. There are these back corridors that connect different sections if you know where they are, and I started using them to get to and from the break room to avoid walking past his station. For about 4 days it worked, and I started thinking maybe I'd imagined the whole pattern. Then I turned a corner near the east corridor one afternoon, and he was just standing there, facing the wall of lockers, and when he heard me, he turned around and smiled. Nothing hostile, nothing you could point to, just standing there, at my locker corridor, at the exact time I was coming off shift. I didn't say anything. I got my bag and left. Is this how I die? Obviously not. It's a theme park on a Tuesday, but I want you to understand the feeling in that moment. Something had shifted and I couldn't pretend it hadn't. I spent that evening sitting in my car in my driveway for longer than I'd like to admit, trying to figure out what exactly I was afraid of and why it felt so concrete. The actual confrontation happened maybe a week after that. I was heading back through the same corridor and he fell into step beside me, completely casual, like we were just 2 coworkers walking the same direction. He started talking about the end of the season coming up, what I was planning to do after. Normal enough. Then he said something about how the drive home must be easier for me since I was going the opposite direction from most of the staff, and he named my neighborhood. Not a general area, my actual neighborhood. I stopped walking. I asked him how he knew that. He got this look on his face, not embarrassed, not caught out, just sort of flat, and said he thought I'd mentioned it. I told him I definitely hadn't. He shrugged and said he must have heard it from someone. Then he kept walking. I went to management the next morning and explained what had been happening. To their credit, the shift supervisor I spoke to did listen, didn't dismiss me immediately, and said she'd look into it. What actually happened was she spoke to Dennis. Dennis said we'd just been friendly coworkers and he hadn't meant anything by any of it. And I was told that without something more concrete, there wasn't much they could do. He hadn't technically violated any policy they could point to. That was a Friday. By the following Monday, I'd already made up my mind. Dennis never did anything overtly threatening. There was no single moment I could put in a police report and have it hold up. What there was a month and a half of someone quietly learning things about me that I hadn't given them, adjusting his movements around mine, and then standing in a corridor at my locker time knowing where I lived. That's enough. It was more than enough. I handed in my uniform 2 weeks before the season closed and didn't go back, and I've thought more than once about the people who stayed and whether any of them ever noticed what I noticed. My daughter was 5, and my son had just turned 8, and I'd been planning that trip for 2 months because I wanted it to be one of those days they'd actually remember. One of those big parks. You know the kind, the ones where you're paying $30 to park before you've even walked through the gate, where the crowds are thick enough by 9 in the morning that you already feel like you made a mistake coming on a Saturday. We got there early, which was the right call, and for the first few hours everything was exactly what I'd hoped it would be. My son wanted to do every ride he was tall enough for. My daughter mostly wanted to meet the characters and get her little autograph book signed. Red flags everywhere, I know. I'm joking. It was a genuinely good morning. By around 11 o'clock, I was starting to feel that particular park exhaustion, the kind that comes from standing in lines and navigating crowds and making constant small decisions about food and bathrooms and which direction to walk next. My son was still running on pure adrenaline, but my daughter was getting that glazed look she gets when she's been overstimulated. I told myself we'd hit the character meet and greet area and then grab lunch and maybe slow down for a bit, let them process what they'd seen so far. That seemed like a reasonable plan at the time. The trouble started, or at least what I now know was the trouble, around midday near one of the character meet and greet areas toward the center of the park. There's this kind of plaza setup they have where a line forms and families shuffle forward and you get your 30 seconds with whoever's out that day. It was packed. I mean, genuinely shoulder to shoulder crowded. The kind of crowd where you're not really walking so much as being carried forward by everyone around you. I had my son's hand and I had my daughter's hand, and then I didn't have my daughter's hand anymore. That's it. That's how fast it happened. Maybe 8 seconds of shuffling and adjusting and suddenly she wasn't beside me. I want to be careful here because I don't want to make it sound more dramatic than the timeline actually was. I found her in under 2 minutes. I know that because I checked my phone right after. But I want you to understand what 2 minutes feels like in that situation, in that crowd, at that noise level, when you're turning in circles calling your kid's name and nobody around you seems to register that anything is wrong. It's its own specific kind of awful. My son was gripping my arm so hard he left marks. When I found her, she was about 40 feet away near the edge of the plaza, standing beside a trash can, completely calm. She was fine. She wasn't crying. I grabbed her, and I probably held on longer than I needed to, and then I did the thing you're not supposed to do, which is immediately start asking questions instead of just letting her breathe. I asked her how she got over there, and she said a man had walked with her. I asked what she meant, and she said a man had been holding her hand and walking her toward the edge of the crowd, and he told her he was going to help find her mom. I'm the mom. I'm her mom. She described him. This is the part I keep coming back to. She's 5, so her description was imprecise in the way that 5-year-olds are imprecise, but she was consistent. Older, she said, tall, a hat, a gray shirt. She said he smelled like sunscreen. She wasn't scared of him, which I think is maybe the most unsettling detail because it tells you something about how deliberate he must have been. What struck me then, and strikes me still, is that she had trusted him completely. There was no hesitation in her account. no sense that she'd felt unsafe. He'd simply taken her hand and told her they were going to find me, and she'd gone with him, accepting this help from a stranger because in the moment it made sense to her. She'd been separated from me in the noise and the crowd, and here was an adult offering a solution. It's the kind of thing that makes you realize how much children are at the mercy of the world's intentions, how little protection trust actually provides. I reported it to park security within maybe 10 minutes. I want to give credit here because they took it seriously immediately, which surprised me. No dismissiveness, no, we get a lot of lost kids today. Within about 20 minutes, they had pulled me into a small office near the main operations area, and they had a team going through footage. I sat there with both kids while they worked, and I remember my son asking me if we were in trouble, and I told him no, and I believed it at the time. What they found on the cameras was not what I was expecting. I think I assumed they'd see the incident itself, maybe confirm her account, and that would be more or less that. What they actually found was that this man appeared in the background of footage from multiple points across the park over the course of more than an hour, in locations that corresponded almost exactly to where we had been throughout the morning. The ride area we'd been at around 10, the food counter where I bought the kids an early lunch, the pathway near the restrooms on the east side. Not directly behind us, not obviously following, just present. Just consistently, repeatedly in the background of wherever we happened to be. The security officer didn't use the word stalking, but that's what we both understood we were looking at. They explained it carefully, professionally, in a way that acknowledged the seriousness without trying to be reassuring in a way that would sound hollow. This man had selected us, had chosen our family specifically, and had watched us move through the park, learning our patterns, our rhythm, waiting for the moment when the crowd was thick enough and the moment was right. It was methodical in a way that made my skin feel wrong on my body. They never identified him. The footage wasn't clear enough for a confident match, and they couldn't get a plate from any of the lot cameras, or if they could, they didn't tell me that part. Security kept the conversation professional, and they filed the incident report and gave me a copy and told me to call the non-emergency line for the local police department if I wanted to take it further. I did call. Nothing came of it as far as I know. I drove home that afternoon and both kids fell asleep in the back seat before we even got on the highway, the way they always do after a long day out. I remember checking my mirrors more than I needed to. I remember not turning on the radio. It wasn't until 2 days later that I went back through the photos on my phone from that day. I do this thing where I take way too many pictures at any kind of event, and then sort through them later when I'm not too tired to actually look. I was going through them on the couch after the kids were in bed, and I found him twice. Once in the background of a shot I took near the entrance in the morning, when we'd barely been there an hour. He's not looking at the camera, he's just standing in the frame, and I might never have noticed him if I hadn't been specifically looking. The second one is the one that bothers me more. He's in the background of a photo I took at 11 that morning, a full 3 hours before any of it happened, just standing there at the edge of the frame looking in our direction.